everybody. Welcome to our third panel conversation. We're going to be talking about what is state of the art in curiosity as it drives value in the digital age. It's genuinely a pleasure to be joined here with by Brian Murphy from Microsoft. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Paul.
And Shannon Minifie from Box of Crayons. Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Brian.
We will be your final panel conversation. Just to give a few words of introduction, Brian is a Senior Director of Employee Skilling at Microsoft. Brian currently leads global internal efforts to reimagine career development through the power of skills. Previously, Brian was Global Head of Learning and Enterprise Capabilities at AstraZeneca, and prior to that, Head of Learning and Leadership Development for Citibank in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. It's great to have you with us, Brian. Shannon Minifie is CEO of Box of Crayons, a learning and development company that helps organizations become more curiosity-led. At Box of Crayons, Shannon works alongside Michael Bungay-Stanier, who you may have heard of. He wrote the best-selling book, The Coaching Habit and The Advice Trap, amongst others. Together, their mission is to help global organizations to be more curious. I don't know if people have been joining a little bit late, but just a little reminder, because we will be sitting down for quite a while. Now that if you could please put questions into the Smart Lab tool, you'll find a little box under our red icon to submit questions. Please also participate in the Game Changers. Tell us what you think in terms of what is changing the game. And if you have time, try out the AI coach, the OpenAI symbol at the top right of the screen. See if that can answer the questions that we don't get to in the panel conversation. Right, we're going to get into it, and I'm going to, guys, take Natalie's question, starting with you, Brian, and ask you, Brian, what are you into?
What am I into? Oh, wow. Well, I loved listening to Natalie and Lisa and Diane and Tim. It's been fantastic. What am I into? So why don't I share some of the things I've been thinking about right now, and really what we're focusing on with my team currently. I think we're living through a phenomenal time. We're really living through a momentous I would call it a platform shift. And obviously at Microsoft, we're at the center of a lot of this generative AI shift. But really, it's interesting when you take the historical view on this. Tech is a GDP growth multiplier historically, right? So it's 4 times in the 1800s to 20 times over the last century. So I think the AI revolution that we're experiencing now really will be the next leg up for the world's economic growth. And for many of us who live in markets with very little growth, I think this is something which is really exciting. But the implications for this, for work and learning, are really profound. And this is something to use a Microsoft word, we're wallowing in at the moment and thinking through. And AI isn't new, but AI has been around for quite some time. Particularly in terms of AI-powered search and social media and serving up recommendations for us and about us, and really using it as an autopilot. But we're now entering an era of AI as a co-pilot, and this is fundamentally a new, where it's being used as a key productivity tool. And I think, this is in the same category of platform shift as the advent of PCs, the internet, smartphone, and so on. It's that big. And so the implications for job and work, bring it back to, what we're all interested in, is profound. We've heard a lot about that already from Diane and Tim and Natalie and Lisa. And I think that will be around how machines and humans can coexist. And that phrase, your job won't be replaced by AI, but you may be replaced by somebody using AI, I think is certainly going to be true. And I think we need to focus on 2 things very quickly. Both involve curiosity. So just to stay on message here. The first is demystifying AI. And that's what we're really interested in focusing on within our learning team at Microsoft, really by experimenting with it. It's really cool that we're doing that today as part of the tool here. So kudos to the team. But leaning in and using our curiosity to learn how we can apply AI to support productivity. But the second thing is dialing up human capabilities. most notably curiosity, I think as a key one of those is going to be critical. And Natalie talked about focusing on what makes us uniquely human. I love that phrase, and it's completely aligned to my thinking here. I don't mean this though as a defensive play, right? So, focus on human capabilities like curiosity, as they're going to be the last thing that are going to get automated. I think about it as dialing up our human capabilities to complement, to get the most out of AI, but also to ensure that we as humans are playing our key role, the key role in this new partnership, the role that we're best placed to play, which is bringing our best selves to work. And so curiosity for me is really top of the list of those meta skills, those human capabilities that we need to be deploying and leveraging every day. So that's what I'm into at the moment, Paul. All this stuff. And I've been nerding out completely listening to the other panelists. It's been fantastic.
No, exactly. Brilliant conversation so far. And you've already given us lots of food for thought in that, because I see questions coming in. But before we get to those, Shannon, same question to you. What are you into at the moment? What's on your mind?
Yeah, I would say, echoing Brian, everything Natalie said, and most of what Lisa said too. And a lot of, Brian, what you've just said. I mean, I can't, the technical level of that conversation is going to be over my head, but I think that like this interesting moment of figuring out what is the role of what is uniquely human in the digital age and with the advent of AI is fascinating to me. It's not the focus of my work. So I lead a company that works with organizations, as Paul said, to help their people develop the habit of staying curious longer. So naturally, I've been delighted to sort of see that curiosity as it relates to organizational effectiveness seems more front and center than it was even just 5 years ago when Francesca Gino outlined for us the business case for curiosity. And of course, Simon and Paul and Garrick's podcast and book and all the work that they're doing. What I've been ruminating on for the past few months is what kind of curiosity are we really talking about? How are we really defining it? Because nothing, this question occurred to me because nothing seemed to really match the form of curiosity that we're teaching at Box of Crayons. And I've noticed within many of the organizations and the business literature sort of expounding curiosity's advantages, there seems to be a tendency to qualify curiosity as a specifically useful type that's put to very specific ends. And Simon, you defined this for us earlier, actually. Curiosity is wonder put into action, wonder with a spirit of exploration. But basically, I noticed that there seemed to be a privileging of a form of curiosity that fuels innovation, drives discovery, that seems to have more of a certain kind of tangible benefit. And again, this didn't really capture the whole of what curiosity could be or who it could be for. So I came across the fact that the word curiosity comes from the Latin to care, which sort of gave me pause and made me wonder, care in what way, bent to what end, for whom? And probably everybody on this call knows that a group of researchers have concluded that curiosity has these 5 dimensions, right? So there's this desire to acquire information, there's the joy of exploration, the thrill of seeking novelty, there's the experience of wonder, there's self-preservation by observing other humans. And the outcomes of all of those forms of curiosity no doubt have a wider positive impact, and it's completely unquestionable. But the practice of it, the satiation, the thrill, even the surveillance for self-preservation, it's reflective. So the care that's curiosity bends back on itself in every one of those instances, it seemed to me. And so I'm interested in, and we're interested at Box of Crayons, in a form of curiosity that seems less at the forefront of discussions about curiosity's ability to drive value. And I'm not a curiosity researcher myself, I might be unique on this call, but I love the recent work of sibling scholars Perry Zern and Danny Bassett, whose book Curious Minds is a really difficult read, I'll just say that. But it's helped me articulate what I think is a deprivileged, but a really important form of curiosity. And that's this, is that there's a form of curiosity that's totally other directed, that is relational. And it's not just relational between bits of information in a sort of constellation of ideas, but it's relational between people. And this curiosity comes not from a desire to know something, but from a desire to support other people in their exploration. So like another way of thinking about it is that it's curiosity to relate rather than to satiate. So the motivations and the outcomes are a little bit different. Yeah, even as I think that they also help create the cultures and drive some of those business outcomes that the other more tangible forms of curiosity certainly drive. So that's kind of what's on my mind, relational curiosity. Where does that fit into this conversation?
Super, thank you, Shannon. Thank you both. And what a great way to start this conversation, because when we're talking about state of the art, of course, these days people's mind is turning to new technologies and artificial intelligence. But of course, what you both said is actually, what does it mean to be human? And for us to think about what it means to be human as we get more into these technologies. So if we could pick up on that theme, because you both mentioned it, you talked about how we can coexist, Brian, and thinking about skill building and how we stay relevant. So I'm interested, maybe if we go down that road first, and then Shannon, I really want to pick up on this idea about the habit of staying curious longer as well. So maybe Brian, I know you write about skills being the new currency. Could you tell us what do you mean by that, and what should we humans be doing as we're thinking about skill building?
Yeah, I think, yeah, we're doing a lot of work, like a lot of organizations around skills intelligence, and we happen to have a few engineers lying about doing some work in this space as well. So I feel very lucky to be working with colleagues in the Viva team, and I think that this shift that we're seeing in terms of moving from sort of a jobs-based orientation around thinking about work to skills-based is something that we're pursuing, and I think it will unlock a lot of organizational agility, but it will give a lot of agency to people to really be able to deploy and develop skills and capabilities in a much more effective way. So I think there's for us, we're thinking about the curiosity certainly as a critical component, matched or enabled by skills intelligence. And really there's sort of three questions that we're helping to answer, both for individuals, but also at the organizational level, team level as well, which is, what skills do I have? What skills do I need? And how do I bridge the gap? And AI and skills intelligence is really helping to enable us to answer those questions. But we've just heard really eloquently about the power of questions, and so curiosity, having the right orientation around this. The technology will only get you so far. The use cases are there, but they need to be enabled through the right mindset and the right approach in terms of curiosity. But we're looking at really cool stuff around how we support real-time skills updates around inventories using skills inference from the workflow, and that application of AI is really cool. Career marketplace solutions that some of the folks on the call here will no doubt be experimenting with as well. So AI enables skills-based career development, and then bridging the gap. Talent marketplaces are increasingly helping us to create personalized skills development and deployment through things like gigs, mentors, and volunteering. But all of these tools and all these great technologies are only going to be enabled if we're supporting the right type of change agenda in parallel, both change in terms of how we are thinking about work in a much more adaptive, agile way, where we're giving people true agency, but most importantly, complementing that with the right type of human capabilities. So we're helping folks ask themselves and others the right questions around skills. So yeah, that would be a few thoughts on the skills piece, but it's a big topic.
Yeah. Shannon, what do you think?
Yeah, I was just thinking, Brian, whether you think like humans are uniquely positioned to do that, like to ask questions, because I definitely think from the perspective of asking questions in order to relate, I think that, so being curious in order to connect with other people, in terms of coexistence, I think one of the questions is, at least on my mind, is like, will AI agents replace or threaten human relationships? Like, is there this threat of synthetic relationship? So like the race to the top for social media is around who can create network effect fastest. And Brian, tell me where I'm right or wrong about this, but for AI, it feels like part of the race might be to create the AI agent with whom that can form the closest relationship to its user the fastest. So it goes from sort of giving you directions or giving you answers to asking you how you're feeling, and you start to be convinced that this thing cares about you. And if we think about relational curiosity and asking questions and what motivates that in a human interaction, I think that AI sentience seems a stretch to me. And AI it doesn't have goals because it's not alive. And so we can't really be in real relationship with something that doesn't want in that way. So I think certainly like those kinds of questions or question asking in that context feels uniquely human. Brian, does it feel like the ability to ask and frame the question, does that seem like one of those uniquely human capabilities?
I absolutely think so. I mean, a lot of the AI product developments that we've been putting in place this year, Sach and the leadership team have been at pains to point out that this is the design of this technology, which has been going on for quite some time, is incredibly human-centric. And so this is, intentionally called a co-pilot, not an autopilot, and really making sure that the individual and the human is at the center of that design is key. And it's, this is an unregulated, uncharted territory that we're in. But these types of principles around human centricity from an ethical perspective are key. But to your point, Shannon, making sure that the human is still in the driving seat and ultimately with agency comes responsibility, right? So your ability to be able to ask right questions, use critical thinking. I think the next generation are going to be challenged. Those of us who've been around a while, we've developed our critical thinking before the age of AI, right? And we've had those learning opportunities in the course of our life to develop that skill. And so as we're getting stuff out of ChatGPT, we're sort of looking at, or if you want to use Bing, it's maybe even better, where it actually references the source data of what's coming through. But then you can use your critical thinking to go, you know what, I'll take bits of that, but I won't take bits of that, or I'm going to go and check that out elsewhere just to make sure. And I think that the next generations, and Natalie, I think, was talking about, how kids, we need to, and Lisa thinking about how we develop questioning skills with kids. I think our kids are going to be those learning opportunities to develop those critical thinking skills are going to be stolen by the productivity gains of AI. So what we gain on one hand, we have to be super conscious of the fact that we're losing out on developing those skills naturally, and we need to enable and support the development of those critical thinking and questioning skills with intent, because I think it's a critical complementary component to AI. I don't know if I've answered your question, Shannon, but I think the answer is yes.
I think you have. But I mean, Brian, are you saying that? Do you think there's a risk that generative AI tools are going to make us less curious, or are they going to make us more curious?
Well, we had a good debate about this, didn't we, on the pod, Paul? I think we talked about this quite at length. I think it depends. So it should make us. It should enable us to be more curious, assuming we're not passive bystanders around this, right? So we need to focus on developing and deploying these human capabilities, most notably a conscious effort to develop curiosity. But AI, will rob this next gen of the sense-making, critical thinking opportunities. So I think Lisa made the point about asking the right questions, and it's certainly going to be the case. So I think AI is an amazing productivity tool, but it needs to be the co-pilot, not the autopilot. And I think we need curiosity to question and overlay what AI is doing for us, so we can deploy it and use it in a human-centric way. So I think it's a yes, assuming that we are taking care of those other points that I make. But I'd be interested in Shannon's point of view on this.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this since Diane shared that in the first panel, that her research had suggested that the proliferation of these kinds of tools, what might actually hinder our ability to be curious. But then, when Natalie, like you gave us Ian Leslie's definition of curiosity, I think it comes from Daniel Byrne, I forget the last name, doesn't matter. But this idea, this sort of paradox at the heart of curiosity, right? Where it's, you need a bit of information in order to become curious, right? So when we've thought that students, for instance, are incurious, they just actually haven't had that bit of stimulation required for them to become more curious. So my instinct is to think that the more access we have to information, the more curious we can become, right? So the act of having to pull together and synthesize that data is sped up considerably with the help of a co-pilot, for instance, but it doesn't mean that all the questions are answered. It means that the work becomes the act of discernment and sifting through and questioning source material. And so now what then? Because we have this, I would think it would lead to more curiosity. I also, just because you raised responsibility, I don't know what I think about this, so I'm just going to drop it out here and see what people think. But I was listening to Dov Seidman of the How Institute on the Moral Leadership podcast, Conscious Leadership podcast. He runs the How Institute for Moral Leadership, and he was saying that, talking about the unique role of humans in an age of generative AI, is that the question with generative AI is, will it get the next thing right? Right? That's the question. Will it get the next thing right? But only a human can do the next right thing. So kind of calling it that this human capability and the responsibility is to act from a place of discerning right and wrong. And on the one hand, I'm like, yes. And on the other hand, I'm like, is this an optimistic view? Have we shown ourselves to do the next right thing? I don't know. Anyway, maybe somebody in the audience has a point of view on that. It's a dark question, but I read a great article. I agree with you. I read a great article over the weekend in HBR about how generative AI can augment human creativity. I don't know if you saw it, but I encourage everyone to have a look at that by Tojan Epen and the team there. But they talk about how they're using tools to do things like promote divergent thinking, to challenge existing biases, to put new ideas together and combine them. I mean, the speed that we can do that now is far greater than it was before. It's not just necessarily about taking the answer spoon-fed, Brian, as you said, but finding ways to use these tools to, as you say, to augment our ability to innovate and create. I mean, I guess to build on that, what are some of the, and this is a question that's come from the audience, what are some of the emergent skills that you're seeing, or both of you are seeing, that we need to be building and paying attention to now? Maybe Brian, start with you.
Yeah, just I guess I'm going to talk a bit about these human capabilities, though I know people might see them as skills, but if we keep going on the theme that what do we need to increasingly care about and focus more on are these, I hate the hard soft thing, but these softer skills around human capabilities. We're actually doing some research in Microsoft right now about this, and we've got sort of a working hypothesis, which I'm happy to share. The first is learning how to learn, which is all about curiosity. It's leading with curiosity. Curiosity about ideas breeds creativity. Curiosity about people breeds empathy. Curiosity about self breeds awareness and growth. So acting with curiosity is the first one. The second one is change adaptation, and so sense making, agile sense making is going to be the critical behavior around that, and I think that goes to critical thinking and questioning. But he also brings in really interesting concepts like network diversity and algorithmic oversight, right? How we're continuing, that dynamic that Shannon and I were just talking about there in terms of that responsibility. And then the last one is collaboration versus cooperation. So collaboration is working together towards a common goal, but cooperation is sharing knowledge simply for the purpose of making the collective more intelligent. So these are innately human capabilities or meta skills that we're really interested in understanding more, and then figuring out how we can, what are the critical behaviors underpinning those, and then what are the frameworks and techniques that we can equip our people to be able to start really dialing up those capabilities. And these are skills and capabilities that are sustainable, that will have that ability to be able to support career growth and success, to complement the technology and the constantly changing harder skills that will get increasingly automated. So these are some things that we're interested in and getting and doing the research on right now.
And that, I think, links directly into, Shannon, the work that you're doing when you talk about curiosity being about building the relationship between people, not just looking for an output, but sort of facilitating the relationship between others. Could you tell us a bit more about that, and also your idea about the habit of staying curious longer? How do we do that?
You do that. So I'll start with the bigger sort of challenge and what organizations are looking for. So there's a pretty big trend around organizations that we're working with who are looking to balance how do their leaders create and drive accountability while retaining like a level of human care that has become table stakes for people's experience in organizations since the pandemic. So how do you both drive and create a culture of high performance and have people feel that you care about them as a person? And it seems like that should be easier to do, doesn't it? And yet I feel like that is actually, there's a place where people struggle. So organizations don't come to us saying, like, you need to help our leaders become more curious. In fact, I think if people usually have curiosity in their values, it's the info gap curiosity that we're talking about, right? But mostly organizations come to us wanting to develop leaders that are capable of showing up in a more humble way. This will get into the answering your habit question, Paul, in a more humble way where they're making space for other people, not just by making themselves smaller, but by creating that space that is stretched bigger by their questions. It's made intimate by the interest that they show for them. And so they're resisting that urge to jump in and follow their own interest, to guide the conversation where they think it should go, which could just be a function of them following their own curiosity, or it could be them thinking they know what the answer is going to be. But either way, that habit of wanting to follow my own instinct, follow my own curiosity, provide my own advice, or tell people what to do, that's the habit that we want people to recognize. That's less helpful. There's a place where, like, jumping in with that expertise can be helpful, but there are times where the impact of staying curious for other people to help ask them questions that help them explore on their own terms is going to not only connect those people to the work more strongly, but connect them to you. Right. And people show up for work that they care about and for the people that they care about. And that's part of what gives them a sense of agency at work. I was at the House of Beautiful Business conference in Portugal a couple of weeks ago, and Tony Bond from Great Places to Work, he's the Chief DEI and Innovation Officer, was talking about what makes a great place to work. And the sort of simple answer is that it's a company that has a listening culture. So a place where people feel heard and there's space to be heard. So how do you help facilitate that and create that kind of place?
I very much like that, and it sort of gets to a question I wanted to ask you. As we're now in a new world of work, and even this year we're in a new world of work than the world we were in last year, right? As people sort of, as you say, Brian, scramble to figure out and experiment what to do with these new tools. What are you seeing? Are there organizations that are successfully doing this, successfully starting to navigate this? Or what are you seeing in terms of how we should be starting to navigate? And you just mentioned listening as a starting point. What are some of the things that you're seeing that we need to do to navigate into this new world of work? Maybe Brian, start with you.
Yeah, I was struck actually by Tim's session earlier when he was talking about some of the macro changes that are happening. And there's sort of 3 or 4 that come to mind, and I think to help try and answer this question. So first is demographics, and we're seeing such fundamental shifts and changes in the workforce. I think Heather McGowan said last year 50% of the workforce are looking to change occupations to better align to purpose. So Tim talked eloquently about purpose. Boomers are being managed by Zoomers for their first time at scale, right? All these amazing shifts and changes, and I'm not convinced that most organizations are really catching up with that and really using curiosity to rethink how we create those workplaces that Shannon mentioned of the future, which are much more inclusive and purpose-led, because what matters for people is shifting fundamentally. I think changing the other one is a changing nature of work. So jobs are increasingly giving way to much more fluid forms of work. We talked about skills-based work, and that's backed up by the data and the evidence as well. So curiosity needed to redesign work in organizations, again, to be much more adaptive. But then this is this interesting yin and yang, because if you do that, you need to give true agency to individuals to be able to trade off their skills and capabilities as well. So that's a shift in the employment sort of contract. And then the other shift here, climate change and innovation, all of these really big rocks changes that are happening, really forcing, I think, putting a lot of pressure on leaders to show up in a very different way. And we have a lot of leadership experts on this call. So, these challenges are only going to get more extreme. So the need for innovation and ability to adapt to change is going to continue to be key at the organizational level. And then lastly, we've talked a lot about AI. So these are four kind of shifts. And I think many organizations are struggling and leaders are struggling to be able to adapt to be successful in that. But it's interesting, and I'd be interested, Shannon, what you think about this, but some of the answers to these challenges have always been the right answers. We're talking about, I always get asked, well, what's the new kind of thing that we should be doing around leadership development? Well, we've talked a lot about psychological safety today. We've talked a lot about creating the right conditions for people to be successful. These have always been how great leaders have led, purpose-led, etc. So I think it's now's the time for great leaders to shine, and for us to continue to create the workplaces that enable people to turn up and be at their best. And I'm not going to get into naming companies about that, but there are some organizations, and certainly I can talk for Microsoft, where we've been working a lot on a growth mindset and a culture around with Carol Dweck and others for many years. And it feels good that work is now paying off, and it feels good that we're in a time of radical change, and we can really take advantage of the foundations we've set with the culture that we've built here. But yeah, interested, Shannon, on your point of view on what's working and what's not working, and what you've seen with your clients.
Yeah, I think that to your last point about these, like creating psychological safety, growth mindset, these have always been the right things to do. I think the question that we often get, or the thing we're helping people in organizations with, is what does it look like when you're doing that? Right? Like, we understand that you need a mindset shift, but what does it look like to be enacted every day? How can every single opportunity be a chance for you to show up one way instead of another, that continues to embody that idea that people can learn, that you can be humble, that you can make space for other people. So I think there's like a really practical aspect to that kind of curiosity that we're trying to help people in organizations develop, which is just, this is what it looks like when you're doing it, because people kind of get it at a head level, but they don't know how to just incorporate that into everything that they're doing and all of their interactions. I think in terms of navigating the disruption, mostly, like Brian, everything you said, not too much else to add, except I think like AI in particular, the challenge for senior leaders is that kind of level of disruption. I think they need to sort of rewrite their value proposition around, my role is not to know what to do here, because I can't possibly know the answers. And so with the more senior leaders that we're working with, which is not all of our population all the time, that's really the focus. It's like they're going to feel the pressure to know the answers and to know what to do, and they can't. They're not going to know. And so having them rewrite that value proposition around, it's my role to show up and just facilitate the exploration together, rather than be the person at the center who knows the answers. That's where we come in supporting that.
Yeah. So shift from leader as expert to leader as coach, and not having the answers, but having the great questions. Back to Natalie and Lisa's narrative around questions.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, their whole exchange, I was like, that's it.
Yeah.
And maybe using some of these Gen AI tools to become a better questioning answer human as well. Folks, I think we're moving towards the end of our time. So I want to thank both Brian Murphy and Shannon for a wonderful conversation. Thanks so much. I really enjoyed that. And I would like to just point everybody to your contributions into the Game Changers app on screen. We're seeing a lot of really interesting ideas come in there. So do take a look, and do keep putting in your ideas into the game changers. So obviously we were starting with GPT-4 and other Gen AI tools, but as we move into sort of global accessibility, agile transformation, maybe even solving climate change. But have a look, and please add in your ideas here. I'm particularly looking forward to see when spatial computing starts to head our way.